somewhere along the way, we started treating styles as though they were personalities, like you just had to pick one and stick with it. And that's where things started to go wrong. Please do not try to transform a team that's just struggling to survive. You'll only make things worse. A culture where engagement at work improves because people feel connected to something bigger than themselves, not the wants or needs of individual leaders. That's how you build a culture that lasts. G'day everyone, and welcome to another episode of Lead on Purpose. My name's James Middleton, and I've spent the last 20 years leading teams of all shapes and sizes in the Australian Air Force and in the private sector. Now, I help organisations develop ethical and purposeful leadership at all levels. I also help you to become the leader that you want to be. I examine real-world leadership challenges and bring you inspiring stories from real leaders, and help you develop practical strategies to help you lead with confidence, clarity, and purpose. Today, we're talking about leadership styles, what they are, why they're important, and why they could be holding you back as a leader. Leadership styles are tools, not identities. If you tie yourself to one style, you're selling yourself short as a leader. And in this episode, I'll explore the 5 most talked about leadership styles and explain why they can work and situations in which they might be holding you back. And later in the episode, I'm going to talk to you about your inner compass and why your inner compass is the true driver of great leadership. I'll explain how you're using your inner compass to guide your leadership, and then adapting your style to the situation you're facing will help you have the influence that you want to have. So here's a bit of history to set the tone. Leadership styles first gained popularity in the mid-20th century. In the 40s and 50s, researchers started categorizing leadership behaviors in an effort to understand why certain leaders were successful. Were they directive? Were they inspirational? Or was it something else entirely? And then came the idea that different situations required different leadership styles. And this is where situational leadership was born. And situational leadership is still very relevant today. But somewhere along the way, we started treating styles as though they were personalities, like you just had to pick one and stick with it. And that's where things started to go wrong. Now I'll break down the 5 most talked about leadership styles and talk about why they may work and why they might be holding you back. The first style is autocratic leadership. This is the command and control style of leadership. Decisions are made quickly, but there's not really any room for collaboration with anyone else. Think, we have a problem, and everyone will get along better if we just do things my way. This can work in crisis situations or high-risk environments where time is critical and immediate action is needed. But it doesn't work in creative or collaborative environments, particularly where people really need to feel heard and valued. It's not effective when you need to find the right course of action, not just the course of action for right now. Autocratic leadership isn't inherently bad. It just is situational and has limited application in a modern workforce. I've used autocratic leadership effectively in the Australian Air Force when I had to make time-critical decisions with limited information because lives were at stake. But I can happily say that I have never, and hopefully will never, use this style of leadership outside of the military. The next style we're going to look at is democratic leadership. This style involves conversation, encourages collaboration, and values consensus when solving problems. This can work really well in team-based environments where innovation and engagement are key, and when you want to build ownership over problems or solutions. But it doesn't work, or it can really hold you back when decisions need to be made quickly, particularly when your team doesn't have the expertise, experience, or context that they need to contribute meaningfully. While democratic leadership builds trust and accountability, it can really slow things down. So use it when you have time. Use it when a situation requires a high level of collaboration and team engagement in order to find the best course of action. Next up is transformational leadership. This is the visionary style. It's about inspiring change and challenging the status quo. And it works during major transitions where you need to shift culture or encourage different ways of thinking. But for it to be successful, it needs buy-in from the people around you. They need to be ready for the transformation and change. If they aren't ready for change or to be stretched, like if they are feeling burned out or disengaged, or you're in a situation where in your team, the basics aren't even being done well, you're going to have a bad time. In these cases, transformational leadership is going to sound a lot more like you, sounding like a broken record, chirping on about how great things will be in the future when we just get through this transformation process, or when we get through this change, everyone will be happier. But without that engagement, there's no substance behind it. So while transformational leadership is powerful, it requires energy and trust, and it really requires you to have a clear end in mind and a pretty good idea of how you're going to get there. Please do not try to transform a team that's just struggling to survive. You'll only make things worse. Next up, we have transactional leadership. This style is all about structure and performance and rewards. In simple terms, you do the work and you get the reward. This style is probably most effective in performance-driven roles where there are very clear expectations and very clear and measurable performance indicators. Things like finance or manufacturing or those sort of high compliance environments. But it doesn't work when creativity or innovation are fundamental to success, like in tech or aerospace design. And it is particularly ineffective and will really make things worse for you in environments where your team needs a high level of emotional support or flexibility. Transactional leadership is efficient, but it often neglects the human side of leadership. You can use it to drive results, but do it sparingly. And don't neglect the broader human aspects of innovative and high-performing cultures. And finally, we're on to servant leadership. This style flips the hierarchy on its head. And it's been highly popularized as a core philosophy of agile project management. The leader serves the team and not the other way around. This style of leadership is most effective in people-first cultures where trust and empathy are critical to success. And when you're trying to build long-term relationships, not just focus on short-term success or short-term wins. But it doesn't work when decisions need to be made quickly, or particularly when boundaries or key responsibilities are unclear within an organization. Servant leadership can be an incredibly effective style, but it can be misunderstood. Serving your team doesn't mean compromising on your values or compromising on your standards. Okay, so we've just talked about the 5 most popular leadership styles. They are autocratic, democratic, transformational, transactional, and servant leadership. That brings us to the key message of this episode. Leadership styles are tools, nothing more, nothing less. You need to know how to use them, but don't strive to become them. Your leadership should be driven by your inner compass, not personality or style. Your inner compass is the deep personal commitment to doing what's right, even when what's right isn't popular or easy. It gives you the clarity of knowing what you stand for, what you value, and where you want your team and the organization to go. Your inner compass gives you a reference for alignment between your values, your team's values, and your organization's values, and also alignment between your organization's purpose, your team's goals, and your personal contribution to making things better. When you have this alignment, your influence as a leader grows exponentially. When you lead, guided by your inner compass, you focus your efforts and energy on getting it right, not just on being right. You make decisions grounded in ethics and not popular opinion. You create consistency and foster connection even when your leadership style changes. And you reduce dependency on yourself because your team is aligned with a shared purpose. They're not just following you because of your personality. Adaptability is a critical component of good leadership, and your inner compass helps you adapt without losing yourself. You can change your style, your tone, your actions, and your behaviors to have the influence you want to have, but through it all, you maintain connection and alignment with your values. When you lead, guided by your inner compass, you start to become the cultural change that you want to see. A culture where productivity is driven by meaning, not pressure. A culture where engagement at work improves because people feel connected to something bigger than themselves. And teams become more resilient and self-sufficient because they're guided by a shared purpose, not the wants or needs of individual leaders. That's how you build a culture that lasts. Not a culture that will fall apart the moment you leave, but one that continues to grow and thrive and build energy long after you've departed. Leadership styles can help you influence culture, but they're not the primary driver of cultural change. Your influence needs to be driven by where you want your team and your organization to go, not who you want to appear to be. So don't tie yourself to a style. Tie yourself to a purpose and let that purpose influence your leadership every single day. Thanks for joining me on this episode of Lead on Purpose. If this episode's given you something to think about or reflect on, or helped you be a better leader, let me know in the comments. Please like, subscribe, and share this episode with a friend. Remember, leadership isn't a title. Leadership is a choice. So make that choice and continue to lead on purpose. My name's James. I'll see you next time.